Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome to the October 2022 edition of the Malaysian Mangrove Research Alliance and Network, MyMangrove Monthly Discourse. And we're so happy, we're so proud to have with us Dr. Louisa Ponnampalam and Dr. Vivian Kuit from MareCet. Yeah, Dr. Louisa, I've known Dr. Louisa for quite a long time by reputation. Yeah, and then apparently we've managed to be part, as well as Dr. Vivian Kuit. We have been part in several projects and relating to coastal and marine environment. And of course, if you look about MareCet, and then if you Google Dr. Louisa and if you Google Dr. Vivian Kuit's name, dolphins, whales, marine mammals will appear top, and all of these awesome works and awesome projects that they've been carrying out and have been running there in Langkawi, as well as all throughout the waters of Malaysia, and as well as they are contributing, their work is contributing to a better understanding and better knowledge advancement on marine mammals all throughout the waters of the tropics, and perhaps also now extending also to coastal and marine environment in the subtropics and further north and south. So I know many of you, I purposely actually, Dr. Louisa and Dr. Vivian, purposely like highlighting dolphins because these are cute animals. I spoke to so many kids, I spoke to so many ladies especially, as well as my male friends. None of them would not get excited if I mention dolphin. Somehow they are super cute. They are super brilliant as well, and they are very important. They're very important as an indicator for the health of our coastal and marine environment. They are also a good important player in connecting these habitats and ecosystems as well. Yeah. So without further ado, actually, I would like to invite now Dr. Louisa Ponnampalam and Dr. Vivian to share with us a topic very dear to many of us, but then not many of us actually knew about the connection or the connectivity that dolphins and other cetaceans play to connect mangroves with other habitats and ecosystems on our coast. And this will be, I'm pretty sure, an eye-opener to many, because all this while, in the past talks and the past discussions about mangroves, the major focus was on the forest itself, the habitat itself, but less focus were given on the fauna and other organisms that play important roles in maintaining or sustaining the habitats and ecosystems themselves. So to further educate us and to provide some insights on new knowledge and an understanding also about this topic, marine mammals and mangroves, and with special reference to cetaceans in the Matang mangroves and coastal waters as the important marine mammal area. I would like now to invite Dr. Louisa and Dr. Vivian for the next maybe 1 to 1.5 hours. Yeah. So Dr. Louisa and Dr. Vivian, the screen is yours.
So hi, good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I want to say thank you very much to Dr. Audrey for this invitation to speak at the MyMangrove Monthly Discourse. I think likewise, it's very nice having Audrey as a fellow colleague in this field of marine science. I don't think I've ever met any other human being on this planet with mad love for mangroves, such as yourself. So, but yeah, happy to be here. Despite being a little bit jet lagged, I just stepped off my flight from the US just a few hours ago. So please bear with me if I'm a little slow in speaking right now. Yeah, so my name is Louisa. I'm the executive director and co-founder of MareCet. And I'll mention what is MareCet in a little while. And very honored to have with me today is Vivian, our scientific officer. Vivian was also my very first PhD student, so it's an honor that we get to present this topic together, a topic in a place that's close to both our hearts, but perhaps closest to Vivian's heart, because this is where she did her doctoral dissertation over several years, a few years ago. So without further ado, we will talk about marine mammals and mangroves, very briefly in general, and then in further detail with special reference to cetaceans in the Matang mangroves and coastal waters, important marine mammal area. So for those of you here who might not be very familiar with what is an important marine mammal area, Vivian will be giving us the lowdown about what a IMA, as we call it, is. Yeah, and I just want to say hello to some familiar names that I see here. Thank you for attending our talk today. Next. So a little bit about the MareCet Research Organization. We are a small grassroots NGO founded in 2012. So this is our 10th year as an NGO registered here in Malaysia. We work primarily in Peninsular Malaysia, in various parts of the west coast of Semenanjung, Malaysia, as well as on the east coast of Johor. Our mission is to conduct research and conservation of marine mammals and their habitats in Malaysia. So the idea is that these charismatic megafauna act as flagship species for us to promote and drive marine conservation efforts within our sphere here in the country. We have 4 pillars of work, namely scientific research. So we conduct primarily ecological research on various species of marine mammals. And that science drives our education and awareness programs with the general public, with school children. That science is also fed into policy advocacy work and consultancy work, where we provide inputs to things such as national action plans for species, management plans, etc. And MareCet was also established as a platform to build local capacity for marine mammal science, as well as marine conservation. So we want to be able to provide young Malaysians the opportunity to experience what it would be like embarking on this kind of work, and to see for themselves if this is something they want to do. And of course, to hopefully groom and help build the capacity for the next generation of marine conservation scientists and marine conservation leaders in our country. Next. So this is just a compilation of some of the species of marine mammals that we work with. We work primarily with coastal species, such as the Indo-Pacific humpback dolphin, Indo-Pacific finless porpoise, Irrawaddy dolphins. And these are 3 species that Vivian will speak more in depth when she presents. We also work with dugongs on the east coast of Johor. And more recently, we have pushed our work further offshore, where we began a project to start studying offshore cetaceans in Kedah, where we are focusing primarily on the Bruder's whale, which is the whale that you can see at the middle bottom of the screen. And along the way, we are recording other species that we encounter offshore, such as Indo-Pacific bottlenose dolphins, as well as spinner dolphins. Next. And this is just a compilation of photos to show you the plethora of activities that we get up to. So whatever that we collect in terms of scientific data, we of course process it and analyze them scientifically, but then we try to convert that information into easily digestible educational and informational material to suit the general public, schools. We provide training to university students as well in terms of topics such as marine mammal stranding response. We engage a lot with the local stakeholders in the areas where we work, speaking with fishers, speaking with tour operators, and we are often also engaged in national meetings that require us to provide input for, as I mentioned earlier, things such as action plans, management plans, shoreline protection plans, and such. Next. So coming back to the topic of marine mammals and mangroves, we work across a pretty wide range of marine habitats and marine ecosystems, but three of the main coastal species that we focus on, which are the humpback dolphins, Irrawaddy dolphins, and Irrawaddy dolphins, are often found associated with mangrove habitats. So here is a picture of an Indo-Pacific finless porpoise. They are one of my most favorite species, despite them being one of the most elusive species out there. Not everybody's favorite to study because they're not easy to study. But we've been very fortunate that in Langkawi, they are quite ubiquitous, and we often see them present in and within the vicinity of mangrove habitats. So this particular sighting here in this photograph was actually within the Kilim Geopark mangrove forest. Because we all know how famous the Kilim Geopark mangroves are. They're the only, I guess Langkawi has the, correct me if I'm wrong, Audrey, but Langkawi has the only mangroves in the country that grow on limestone, and very ancient limestone that is. So it really is a very special place. And I always say that, I dare say that Langkawi is one of the best places in the region to see this elusive species, because I think the mangroves there provide a very productive habitat for them as a feeding ground, as a safe haven for them to nurture their young. And sharing this mangrove habitat in Langkawi with the finless porpoise is another regularly occurring species, which is the Indo-Pacific humpback dolphin. So these guys also, we've been studying them in Langkawi over the last 12 years, and we often see them right up next to the mangroves and across the mud flats that are adjacent to these mangroves. So once again, at least in Langkawi, as we know, these mangroves provide really a very productive hunting ground and feeding ground for this species, as well as a place to nurture their young. So we often see mother and calf pairs within vicinity of the mangroves in Langkawi. Next. Over here, we move across South China Sea to Sabah, where in 2017, our team were part of the Tun Mustafa Park scientific expedition. And our role in that expedition was to look at the diversity and distribution of marine mammals within the newly gazetted Tun Mustafa Park at the time. And as you can see from the map, we didn't have very many sightings, unfortunately, despite some days that were completely nice and calm. However, one very exciting discovery that we had on this expedition was of a sighting of a group of Indo-Pacific humpback dolphins, as you can see in these photographs here. So they were found sort of to the east of the Tun Mustafa Park. I think, if I'm not mistaken, we saw them quite close to Pulau Mandi Dara. But you can see on the screen, there's an arrow pointing to the horizon line. That's actually not the horizon, that's the shoreline. We were a little bit further away from the shore, but I put the arrow there is because actually that whole shoreline was mangroves. So again, this was the first confirmation of this species, Indo-Pacific humpback dolphins, occurring in Kudat waters, as far as we could tell, just from scouring literature and etc. And we found them within vicinity of an area that had extensive mangrove shoreline. So sure, they were a little bit further away, as you can see from the photograph, but definitely they were not too far away from mangrove habitat. So once again, just cementing how important or significant mangrove forests, mangrove habitats are to certain species of marine mammals within the country as well as in other parts of the world. And I'll give you some example. We move across to South America, where next, this is a photo I just took off the Facebook. Go back one. Yeah. So this are a group of Guyana dolphins, which is another very coastal dwelling species in South and Central America. Well, they occur from the lower half of Central America all the way down to southern Brazil, so on the Atlantic coast side. But you can see in the photograph as well, they are a mangrove-associated species. I almost would like to think that they are the South American equivalent of the Indo-Pacific humpback dolphins that we have here. Yeah. And another example of how mangroves are significant to marine mammals is this. So this is a Florida manatee in the Indian River Lagoon in Florida in the US. And I was doing a little bit of reading about these guys and how they're associated with mangroves. And turns out Florida manatees sometimes eat mangrove leaves. They eat a vast variety of aquatic vegetation in the lagoons and in the estuaries where they inhabit. However, they also do every so often decide that they would like to snack on mangrove leaves. So you can see that mangroves are not only important for cetaceans, which are the dolphins and the porpoises, the coastal ones, but also for some species of sirenian. So with that, I would like to bring our focus back here to Malaysia, where I will hand it over to Vivian to tell us more about the work that we've been doing and what we know about marine mammals in the Matang important marine mammal area. So over to you, Vivian, and thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Louisa. We just started to rain heavily here, so I hope you guys can still hear me. So I'm happy to share a little bit more about Matang dolphin research and also about what actually important marine mammal areas are. So important marine mammal area, or IMA, is a discrete portion of habitat which are deemed important to marine mammal species and has the potential to be delineated and managed for conservation. So to identify what are the IMA sites, usually marine mammal experts are invited to apply these criteria such as species or population vulnerability, distribution and abundance, key life cycle and activities, and also special attributes. So some of these criteria include whether the populations are vulnerable, are there large aggregations, is it an important area for reproduction, feeding, and also diversity of the population. So in Malaysia, currently we have 5 important marine mammal areas. The first one is the Satun Langkawi Archipelago, which is transboundary with Thailand. And the one we will be talking more in this presentation would be the Matang Mangroves and Coastal Waters IMA. On the east coast of Peninsular Malaysia, there's also the Mersing Archipelago IMA. And on the East Malaysia side in Sarawak, we have the Singiraja Kuala Nyalau coastline and also the Kuching Bay IMA. So Matang has been an IMA since 2019, and a bit more about this Matang IMA is that the size is approximately 2,386 square kilometers, and the criteria that qualify for this Matang IMA includes the population vulnerability, the aggregations and also the reproduction and feeding areas, and also the diversity of it. So globally, there are about 88 species of cetaceans, meaning whales, dolphins, and porpoises. And in Malaysia alone, we have recorded at least 27 species of whales, dolphins, porpoises, and dugongs in our waters, based on live sightings and also dead stranding records. So as Dr. Louisa have mentioned previously, these are some of the most commonly encountered marine mammals in Malaysia. And on the left of it, you see for Matang dolphin research, the three focal species are the Indo-Pacific humpback dolphins, Irrawaddy dolphins, and also the Indo-Pacific finless porpoises. So let's start with this Indo-Pacific humpback dolphin, or also known as Lumba Putih in our local language. So they are born gray. As you can see, this is a mother and calf pair. And as they mature, they gradually lose their gray pigmentation and they become molted pink. And in some places, for example, Hong Kong and China, they could turn completely pink. These species occasionally may bow right or breach. And if ever people go to Kuala Sepetang for dolphin watching, this is the species that they are most likely to see. And if you notice, they do have a rostrum, like what most people would identify dolphins as. And humpback dolphins are listed as vulnerable on the IUCN Red List. So you see, this is a humpback dolphin that was spy hopping in Matang. Next is the Irrawaddy dolphin or Lumba empesut. They are listed as endangered on the IUCN Red List. Compared to the humpback dolphins just now, you see that these species do not have a rostrum, so they have a rounded head, and they are uniformly dark gray, and they are slightly lighter on the ventral side, the belly side. And compared to humpback dolphin, which has a more prominent dorsal fin, the dorsal fin of Irrawaddy dolphins are smaller and stubby. So some of the special behavior that sometimes we see is that the Irrawaddy dolphins can spit water. Water spitting is usually linked to like foraging, like chasing, herding fish. And they also occasionally spy hop as well. Spy hop meaning they momentarily rise vertically on water to check out their surrounding. Next is the Indo-Pacific finless porpoise or Lumba ticus, which is also Dr. Louisa's favorite species. And as the name suggests, finless porpoise, they do not have a dorsal fin, so they are called finless. And they, similar to Irrawaddy dolphins, they have a rounded head and they are uniformly dark gray as well. But they are usually more shy, they are smaller as well. So, and they are porpoises and slightly different from dolphins. Porpoises have spade-shaped teeth, they are smaller and usually have a shorter lifespan and generally more shy and evasive as well. And they are listed as vulnerable as well on the IUCN Red List. So next we move into better understanding of their ecology. So for the Matang dolphin research, we studied a few components of ecology, including population estimates, abundance estimates. So for humpback dolphins, because we do not have matches between the estuarine and the coastal dolphins, so we estimate the abundance separately. So for the estuarine alone, we estimated in between 2013 to 2016 in different years, the annual abundance estimates is between 68 to 87 individuals, whereas for the whole site, it's between 81 to 138 individuals. Next, for Irrawaddy dolphins and for finless porpoises, we use another method for abundance estimation, which is the line transect method. So for Irrawaddy dolphins, we estimated about 763 individuals throughout the Matang, the study area. You may think that it might be a lot, but when you divide it based on the area of the sites, the density is actually about 0.66 individual per square kilometer. As for fitness purposes, it's estimated that there are about 600 individuals in the Matang study area. Next, we look into the distribution and encounter rates. So for the first one, we see humpback dolphins has a distribution that's more inshore. They generally hug the coast a little bit more, and sometimes they enter the rivers as well. And there are also occasionally some sightings that are further off in the coastal waters. As for Irrawaddy dolphins, you see they are distributed mostly throughout the study area, but they do not enter the rivers as often as the humpback dolphins. And as for fitness purposes, they are found even further from the shore in deeper waters as well. Next, this one we can see what behavior did they exhibit when we have their sightings. So you see for the ones in red and orange, mostly they are feeding and foraging, especially for humpback dolphins near the estuaries and inside the rivers. They are mostly feeding. There's some socializing behavior off the coast as well. For Irrawaddy dolphins, they are also feeding and foraging throughout the coastal waters with some herding activity off the coast, which we will have a look at what actually is herding. And also some sightings where we see them mating. As for fitness purposes, most of the behavior are undetermined because the sightings are rather brief. But we do see some behavior such as traveling and also milling as well. So here's a video of Irrawaddy dolphins herding off the coast of Matang. Where you will see sometimes they will, most of them surface at the same time and very close to each other. So this herding behavior is linked, we think it is linked to mating activity. So it's a form of intense socializing linked to mating. And it's actually very exciting to watch Irrawaddy dolphins herding. See, they keep a very close knit group as well. There's also sightings where we see them mating. So in this photo, you can see the penis of an Irrawaddy dolphin as well. So in terms of habitat characteristics, we see that humpback dolphins and Irrawaddy dolphins are found further from the river mouths in deeper waters and in waters that are more saline. So the humpback dolphins generally stay closer to river mouths in shallow waters and in lower salinity as well. So we also look into the distance to river mouth by tidal state. So we found that humpback dolphins and Irrawaddy dolphins are found further from river mouths during low tide and nearer to river mouths during high tide. And this is likely linked to the tidal movement of their prey, similar to other studies. And in terms of feeding ground, here's a photo where you see there's a lot of catfish heads that we collected. So when humpback dolphins prey on this species of catfish called Sargo catfish, they generally avoid the head part and they just eat the body part of it. So some of the feeding and foraging behavior where the core feeding grounds are near the estuaries as well, and sometimes in the rivers. As for Irrawaddy dolphins, it has a bigger area and off Kuala Larut and Kuala Trong in Matang. So one of the indication that we look at to determine what the dolphins are doing is by looking at this sign where we see them digging on the mud. So you will see some mud on their rostrum, on their melon. So the mud on rostrum indicate that they have been digging for their prey for some for their benthic fishes, such as a Sagor catfish as well. So this is the Sagor catfish, or known as ikan belukang. So why do they avoid the body part? Sorry, avoid the head part. So usually dolphins would eat the fish whole, but because this Sagor catfish has a hard head plate on top of its head here, and also a long and sharp dorsal spine and two pectoral spines on both left and right side. So if they swallow the whole fish, they might get injured, especially for this catfish with thicker spines. So they generally just bite the body of the catfish, and the head part will just float on the water. So sometimes we see the catfish heads first before we sighted the dolphin groups as well. So in terms of nursing ground, we see humpback dolphin sightings with mother calf pairs. So the size of the circles indicate how many mother calf pairs. And these are the, and you can see the humpback dolphins, the nursing grounds are mostly off Kuala Sanggar Besar and Kuala Larut, and also on Kuala Jarum Mas. As for Irrawaddy dolphins, it is off the coast of Kuala Larut and Kuala Trong, and also Pantai Remis. So in this photo, you see a mother and calf pair here. So usually calf will stay very close to their mom for a few years. And you see the calf is smaller and has not started to be pink yet. So this is the mom and this is the calf. And generally, they stay in close contact, a lot of skin contact with each other. And for very young calves that are just born, you will see something like this called fetal folds. So fetal folds are formed when they are folded in the womb. So for very young calves, we will notice that they have fetal folds, still have fetal folds on their body. This is the face of this neonate. And also for Irrawaddy dolphins, the photo here shows this Irrawaddy dolphin neonate with fetal folds as well on its body. And you might also notice some white scars on this Irrawaddy dolphins, but these are called tooth rakes from socializing, and are usually more prominent in more in male Irrawaddy dolphins. So these white tooth rakes are temporary and it will heal. And in terms of movement and home range, we see that there are some offshore humpback dolphins that occasionally enter the study site, but we have not seen these individuals enter into the estuarine areas. They mostly were seen around in the north coastal or south coastal sub-regions, and then they might move in and out of the study area. So Irrawaddy dolphins, we do see them moving inshore and offshore in the study area. So in terms of the movement and home range in core areas via kernel density estimates, we see that the core areas of these inshore humpback dolphins are off Kuala Sanggar Besar and Kuala Larut and Kuala Jarum Mas, whereas the core areas for these offshore individuals are on the north and south coastal waters. And for Irrawaddy dolphins, their core areas are the coastal waters of Kuala Larut, Kuala Trong, and Pantai Remis. And these are the sizes of their core areas. So here's 12 MCP ranges. These are based on different individuals. So for each map indicates where one individual was seen moving. So you will see that the MCP ranges of these inshore resident humpback dolphins are generally the same. They move in between different estuaries they are seen in. Kuala Gula some days, Kuala Sangga Besar, Kuala Sepetang, Kuala Larut, Kuala Trong, and Kuala Jarum Mas. So this is mostly also linked to their feeding behavior, where we often see them sometimes feeding in different estuaries. So if you are wondering what actually do these humpback dolphins eat, we found that they, based on stomach content analysis, so this is the stomach content of a humpback dolphin, we see that they eat fishes like sago catfish, engrave catfish, some spotted catfish, some croakers, and gray eel-tail catfish, and also threadfins. So in the stomach content, we see this is the remains of catfish head plate, and also some otoliths, and also catfish spines. So otoliths, we see some arid otoliths, catfish otoliths, and also some croaker otoliths as well. So these otoliths are different in shape, so we can differentiate them. So there are also some catfish spines in the stomach content, although we can't really tell which species exactly, because some are slightly digested already. But these catfish seems to be smaller and thinner than the ones that we see on the catfish head remains. As for the ones in yellow boxes, these are from the gray eel-tail catfish. So next we move into the threats to marine mammals. These are some general threats to marine mammals, such as intensive fishing activities, harassment from boats, heavy vessel traffic, pollution, coastal development, and also lack of awareness. So in Matang, we often see humpback dolphins being right where human activities are, such as fishing activities, and also very near to the fishing villages as well. Sometimes we see them swimming right in the middle of all those plastic garbages, example, plastic bags, plastic bottles, and etc. And also some of these individuals were seen with poor body condition or emaciated. So you see that they are a bit skinny, and you see how their body are like not as plump as they should be. So this indicates poor nutrition as well. There were also some skin diseases that we have seen on our dolphins. For example, this is the first individual that we actually cataloged in our database, and this is called patches. We've seen it once in 2013 July, but we have not since seen it anymore. There are also some Irrawaddy dolphins with cutaneous nodules as well. You see, these are some nodules and some other skin disease. For Matang dolphin research, we also conducted interview surveys with local fishers to better understand about the human-dolphin interactions. So about 14% of these fishers that we have interviewed said that they had bycatch in the past, out of which mostly they were in gill nets, followed by trawl nets, drift nets, tremor nets, and also a bit of bag nets. In terms of injuries, we see different types of injuries. Some are in the confirmed and probable anthropogenic injuries. So you see some deep gashes, and these are likely to be some propeller cuts. You see some repetitive cuts at regular intervals. there were also some nicks and notches on their dorsal fin with straight cuts as well. But there are also some injuries that are from others, from the same species, from same species competition, and also some shark bite injuries. These are some shark bite injury scars, and some injuries are undetermined. So this is the percentage of prevalence of different types of injuries on humpback dolphins and Irrawaddy dolphins in Matang. So there were about 10 Irrawaddy dolphins with single deep indentation on their body or dorsal fin, one Irrawaddy dolphin with propeller cuts, about 39 Irrawaddy dolphins with linear severed dorsal fin, and other types of injuries as well. And also because Matang is an important fishing site. So sometimes you see them right in the path of trawlers as well. These are, I think, Irrawaddy dolphins in the path of trawlers that are trawling. So we conducted a BIRA or bycatch risk assessment to assess which are the areas with the highest bycatch risk in Matang. So you see the red areas indicate high bycatch risk. For example, in Kuala Sangga Besar, Kuala Larut, off Kuala Trong, and Kuala Jarum Mas. This is for Irrawaddy dolphins in the coastal waters. And finless porpoises have high bycatch risk in this zone where the trawlers are. So for humpback dolphins and Irrawaddy dolphins, they have higher bycatch risk from gill nets and drift nets, whereas finless porpoises have higher bycatch risk from trawl nets. And these are the bycatch risk plots showing their consequence and exposure scores of the nets. So from the results that we have obtained from the study, this year we started this bycatch mitigation trial project in Matang, where we are looking into testing the use of acoustic pingers in gill nets and drift nets in Matang, so that the humpback dolphin, we wanted to see if humpback dolphins would stay further away from these gill nets and drift nets with the acoustic pingers installed on fishers' nets, so that fishers can continue to catch the species that they want to catch without accidentally entangling dolphins in their fishing nets as well. And as you can see, that is a very quick and brief intro about Matang dolphin research. And Matang is really a special place with fascinating wildlife, including Brahmini kites, all sorts of birds like kingfishers, lesser Egyptian egrets, and also smooth-coated otters as well. So, and I'm sure Audrey loves Matang more than us as well, with his great passion in mangroves. So these are some of our social media handles, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Vivian. From the start, like I was so excited to see all of these pictures, like super cute, and then with the video. And then towards the end, I was a little bit disappointed looking at all the injuries. I would imagine that was a fungal attack, I assume, on the skin, right? Or maybe some other diseases. And of course the impacts coming from boats. So that was disappointing ending of the of all the nice photos. And there you go. This is a very important reminder actually. So now we know humpback dolphins in particular, that study that you've presented just now, Vivian and Louisa. I mean, they really go into the mangroves, like right in the small channels as well. And then some of them like of course forage. And I assume, do they give birth in the mangrove as well, Vivian? I mean, have you, I mean, documented that, or perhaps they I mean, give birth like somewhere else? Do we have any knowledge about that? I mean, the babies.
We we haven't had the privilege
Mhm.
to watch a birthing event in Matang,
Okay.
but we've come across what appears to be really newly born animals.
Okay.
So it is unlikely, and when we encountered those groups that have those neonates, those animals with really deep fetal folds, I mean that's really indicative of you're just quite freshly born, because basically the fetal folds will will fade as the animal grows because the skin gets stretched.
Got it.
So an animal with dark and very indented fetal folds is really indicative of an animal that's very freshly born.
Yeah.
So we've not had the opportunity to watch a birthing event in Matang, but we've seen these groups with these really young neonates within the vicinity of the mangroves and the estuaries. So it's most likely that that's where they would be. Mangroves are relatively shallow, they're calm, and they provide the shelter I think needed
Yeah.
for safe birthing. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I think.
I would agree to that idea. I mean, like strong assumption saying because they need perhaps like humans, right? We need like I mean, a safe, quiet, maybe yeah, a conducive place to like give birth, like, and then imagine that a few hours of I mean labor for humans. I mean they would require that as well. So it's just nice, right? I mean like high tide, like taking them in, and then perhaps 5 6 hours of time for labor, and then yeah, the baby pops out. So wow, that's super beautiful. I mean, really, really glad to hear this, and I'm pretty sure I received like as we speak. I mean, I received like I don't know 12, 13 texts, like super excited to see. I mean this occurrence of dolphins and porpoises. And you know what? I mean, like my eyes. I mean, of course, I mean I enter mangrove looking for the plants most of the time, but of course, be wary of the wildlife as well. But of course, in I mean, of course, the priority is during low tide, right? So to encounter them would be possibly most of the time on boats. But then they are there. So this is a message to managers, to local communities, right? To pay, I mean, really important attention that they are there as part of the habitat and ecosystem, making the ecosystem complete, basically, right? So, and then of course, and thank you for that very comprehensive study that, I mean, of course, you know the distribution now, I mean, particularly in Matang, and I would imagine also the occurrence all throughout West Coast of Peninsular Malaysia and East Coast of Peninsular Malaysia. And perhaps how about our mangroves in Sabah and Sarawak? I know you've presented some on Tun Mustafa Park, but I assume facing South China Sea on Sarawak side, I mean, there are occurrences as well, right, Louisa, if I'm not mistaken?
Yeah, so we've got our colleague Cindy Peter here with us in the audience. She's with the Sarawak Dolphin Project in UNIMAS, and they work around Kuching Bay and the Kuching wetlands, where there's also a lot of mangrove associated habitat. And they also get the same three coastal species that we work with, which are the pinless porpoise, Irrawaddy dolphins, and the humpback dolphins. And I actually didn't mention it in the earlier part of the talk where I was giving examples, but as industrialized or as disturbed a habitat as the Port Klang area is, actually there are also coastal cetaceans that occur there. We haven't really done much work in the Port Klang Islands area for cetaceans, but I've been out there once, I think some years ago, and funnily enough, we did have a sighting of a Irrawaddy dolphin group, also very close to the mangroves, but the mangroves were facing the port area, directly across the port area. I was actually quite surprised, but delighted at the same time to encounter that group, because it sort of gave me a reminder that if you give these animals enough prime habitat, despite a lot of the disturbance that are ongoing, what we found with marine mammals is that they're really quite resilient. I mean, that's home, and you can't just, they sometimes, if there's too much disturbance, they do move out. But as one of my mentors told me when I was just a student, is that with marine mammals, if there's food, you're going to have marine mammals. And I believe, like in the case of the Port Klang area, yes, there's a lot of disturbance. There's shipping, the underwater noise. Parts of that coast is probably devoid now of mangroves or good habitat. But then, adjacent to it is still a lot of habitat that is mangrove lined, and that provides shelter and food, most importantly, food. So I think we don't know much about the marine mammals in that area. We don't know how many there are, etc. But they still persist, I believe, because there's still good enough habitat for them to occupy. Yeah. And just going back to what you mentioned earlier, I mean, we're sorry to make you sad. By the end of the talk, it was all about doom and gloom. But that's exactly why we work on these charismatic marine mammals. I mean, yes, they're charismatic, and some people, as you have used the word cuteness overload and whatnot. Cuteness, by the way, is a bit of a banned word in our group because it's like, no, we're doing serious work here. They're not just cute. But the point is that they're very big and they're very obvious, and they really do bear the brunt of the impact of human activities, as you saw in the slides that Vivian showed just now. And it allows us to understand what's happening. They act as indicators of what's going on out there, and it provides us with the basis to think of what kind of action do we need to take to better safeguard the animals themselves, but also the habitat. And here in Malaysia, yes, they are protected under Fisheries Act 1985, but the Act primarily protects the animals themselves. So you can't hunt them, you can't eat them, you can't trade them, you can't keep them as a pet, etc. But there is no protection afforded to their home. So it's almost like you can protect them, but if their home's not protected and all sorts of things are happening in there, then they are still at risk of, being decimated, or at risk of being injured and exposed to all sorts of threats. So the idea is that we use them as a flagship species. You can see from the slides that Vivian showed just now that they do range quite extensively up and down along the coast, and so along shore and offshore, onshore, offshore. And in protecting their prime habitats, we are able to protect so much more as well. Other marine species that are living in the area, our seafood resources, etc. Yeah. And so even though it sort of ended on a bit of a sad note, but I think it does serve as a reminder why they are important flagship species for conservation and management. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, like, I totally agree with you. I mean, like, this is a very important storyline. In fact, I'm very thankful that you mentioned about that final point. Like, many of our laws or legal tools that we have at the moment is very targeted. Like, for example, forest management is looking at the management of these forests in particular. I mean, this is Matang behind me, by the way. This is Matang. I would imagine the humpback dolphin actually pass through this channel. This is Sungai Rebel, by the way. And and of course, I mean, targeting the forest management system, and the Fisheries Act maybe looking at the fish species and maybe fisheries resources. But then, of course, there is a provision on marine parks and marine reserve as well in the Fisheries Act. So I think this is a very good point that you've raised. I mean, IMMA is one of the tools or channels that we can push and make it stronger. I mean, using our existing laws or regulations that we have in the country now, so make it stronger, and perhaps we can work on better protection of the habitat. Also, I mean, totally in line with your point just now, Louisa. Like, the more area we protect, for example, in plant dimension, the more area we have actually higher opportunity or higher probability to provide home for more species of plants. And imagine plants, right? So it will be the same with fauna organism as well. So I mean, thank you very much for highlighting that. Earlier points, I mean, of course, changes happening on the mangroves all throughout our coastlines. Perhaps this will be uh, um, uh, I mean, this could be a triggering factor of turning some of the rural dolphins into urban dolphins, if you like, or maybe this is part of their adaptations, and then it's a good point also to monitor and to see their resilience, right, towards changes. So, but then of course, I mean, there must be a threshold limit that we have to set, and perhaps I mean damages in Klang Islands, for example. Of course, there is a group of mangrove islands all throughout Klang Islands, and some, I mean, like Pulau Keri, for example, Pulau Indah has totally turned into industrialized ports, yeah, area, and then Pulau Ketam is I mean, we have people living in Pulau Ketam now. So I mean, but in between these, I mean, the more terrestrial and furthermost Pulau Ketam is still intact mangrove forest. So I think this is the savior, the final frontier for these marine mammals, right? So and then pressure is coming also to other habitats along the way. You see, I mean, I mean, I may be wrong, but correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, of course, connecting habitats. Like, of course, we need, I mean, patches of mangrove, or maybe a contiguous mangrove all throughout the coast to provide um, um, uh, I mean, stopover for them. Is that correct, or do they like of course you monitor the range, but then do they like just stick to Matang, or they actually travel further down south to maybe Singapore or Pacific? Do they do that?
Vivian, you want to take this one?
As you know, we have the inshore and offshore dolphins. So for the inshore ones, we do not know how far they extend because we have not expanded our study site to the adjacent north and south boundaries. But we do have some matches of the offshore humpback dolphins in our project sites in Perlis, Kedah, and Perlis and Langkawi as well. Yeah.
Right. So grant providers, please put this as a very high priority, because I think, I mean, this matches with some ongoing eDNA studies, yeah, in mangrove ecosystems throughout the country. So I reckon genetic genomics study on marine mammals would be another important contribution to that understanding, right? All right. So
Just to add on to what Vivian said, I mean, basically these dolphins are, or these marine mammals are kind of like people. Some people love to travel. They like to merantau, they like to explore. And some are just homebodies. They just like to hang out in their neighborhood and go to the same kopitiam every day. They don't go very far. So what we're finding is that you've got the roamers, and then you've got the ones that just kind of hang around the few different estuaries, and for the most of their existence, that's where they'll be. But as you mentioned, we have yet to study every area, every pocket of the coast that has dolphins, although the west coast of Peninsular Malaysia does seem to host significant populations of humpback dolphins as well as Irrawaddy dolphins. Certainly in the waters of Penang, in the waters south of Matang to Pangkor. I mean, we've had third-party reports from around there, Lumut, all the way down to Pontian, which is not surprising because the habitat is, if you look at the habitat type, it is the habitat type of these species that would occur. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot more to learn and to discover, either through visual surveys, acoustic surveys, or even genetics. Yeah.
Interesting. And they of course meet their friends and relatives down there, the dugongs, yeah, down south in Pontian. Wow, this is awesome. And yeah, like me, I'm a very homely type. So I like you mentioned, I know the same restaurant, I will go to the same and order the same meal most of the time actually. So okay, so they are mammals. Yeah, there you go, guys, ladies and gentlemen. Think of them, they are mammals. And speaking of mammals now, there are some questions coming in. And I was thinking about the diet, and apparently Dr. Harinder is asking almost the same question. So you've shown some of the remains of fishes that they feed on, and so are they carnivores or are they omnivores? But then because you've showed a manatee's photo in Florida or in Guyana just now, feeding on mangrove. I mean, that was super short, by the way. But if we can get like some shots here, also like, I mean, we know turtles. I mean, fat. I mean, I saw this one very powerful photo, like a turtle feeding on Avicennia seeds. And then, I mean, I haven't seen any awesome photos of them feeding on mangrove fruits or leaves just yet. But then, are they omnivores or are they carnivores? And connecting to Dr. Harinder's question, are the diets of the dolphins in Langkawi waters similar to the one in Matang?
Okay, yeah, I can answer that. So, hi, Dr. Harinder. Thank you for your question. I mean, manatees, we know they are omnivorous. In Africa, they have been observed, taking shellfish off of fishermen's nets, but they also eat a vast variety of aquatic vegetation. With dugongs, as far as we know, they only eat seagrass. I mean, they do sometimes eat seaweed, but I've never heard any documentation of dugongs feeding on mangrove leaves. But with cetaceans are carnivores. They eat udang, ikan, sotong, yeah. And in Matang, between Matang and Langkawi, we have observed some similarities, but mostly quite different diets. They eat udang, ikan, sotong, yeah. And anyway, so for example, with finless porpoises in Langkawi, what we've observed through collection of stomach contents from dead stranded specimens is that they are very heavy on cephalopods. They consume a lot of octopus as well as squid. We've even seen them hunting in areas where we know there's quite a lot of octopus, or during squid season, we get the fishers telling us that they don't like these finless porpoises because they come around and try to take the squid off the squid jigs, right? And it leaves people with no squid to catch. So yeah, we've seen a lot of cephalopod beaks in the stomach content remains of finless porpoises in Langkawi. And sometimes we see the squid ink before we even see the animals. So suddenly the water will turn black, and then we'll be like, was that squid ink? So we'll wait. And then a few seconds later, you'll see the porpoises popping up. In Matang, we don't have that many samples from finless porpoises, but for the ones that we have, we found that yes, they do eat a combination of squid beaks as well, but we also found prawns in their stomach content, like whole, like consumed prawns. Yeah, so we've never seen, we have more specimens in Langkawi's samples, but we've never seen prawns in there. As for the dolphins, at least in Langkawi, we've never seen them eating on the sagor catfish like how they do on the mainland side in Perlis and Kedah, as well as in Matang. We know they do feed on catfish, various species of catfish, but we've never seen the floating catfish heads. And then, of course, in Matang, they are like, it's a catfish galore for them. They love their catfish. The occasional udang, some cephalopods, but yeah, they're very big on their catfish.
Yeah, again, relating to our, I mean, humans, I think in some different places we have our signature dishes, right, Arinda? So perhaps this group like Budu, this group like Belacan, like different different preferences, and maybe due to the availability of the foods as well. So I think that makes sense. Yeah? And I hope, we hope that answer your question, Arinda.
Maybe just
Okay,
follow up.
please. Yes.
Louisa, thanks, and Vivian, thank you for the wonderful talk. I'm really, I've learned a lot today, and I'm just wondering whether these dolphins and these porpoises, are they opportunistic species? In terms of the diets, at least. Because what
Yeah.
you describe is something like where there's an opportunity to feed, they will feed. Well, like in Matang, I know, because I did my works in Matang on the catfish, I know there are massive populations of catfishes there. So I would say that, you know, definitely they will go for something that is abundant.
I mean, it's hard to really answer your question with great certainty because there's so many factors that we don't know. You know, how they feed, is it based on what is abundant at the time? Is it based on, they like a certain species specifically? It does appear at the moment, from what we can tell, that they are quite targeted in what they consume, at least in Matang, especially with Sagor catfish. And then there's a few others, catfish, ikan sembilang as well, that appears in their diet. But I wouldn't be able to say for sure, like, is it one or the other, or is it there's a shift? We really don't have enough samples to be able to tell the full story. And these samples are really quite opportunistic to come by because it's only when we have a dead animal that shows up, and then if we get to the carcass soon enough to be able to take out the stomach and clear. And even sometimes stranded animals have empty stomachs. They would have died without having consuming anything. So might be a while before we can answer that question, but it is a good question and food for thought. Yeah.
There you go, opportunity for a merger or for new research, Harinder. So I mean, we have MareCet now, and then your team, and then perhaps Amy Tan's team as well. I mean, we can merge now, looking at their diet, looking at their feeding behavior. Yeah? So yeah, I mean, like, we can expand this, and this is actually one of the primary objectives of having this MyMangrove monthly discourse, Louisa. For now, we know that the interested people, I mean, of course, I mean, we have people here on Zoom, but we also have our viewers on YouTube now. Now, of course, I cannot reach to the crowd on YouTube at the moment, but of course, we can always communicate, continue this discussion on. Yeah? And of course, more questions actually. I mean, there's one from Moritz, Professor Moritz Muller from Swinburne. Hi, Moritz. So he said, nice presentation, thank you. Would it be possible to obtain samples for microplastic analysis? There you go, another interesting topic. Vivian highlighted, showed us some photos of them swimming among plastic bottles, marine debris. I meant, yeah, I mean, I've seen, these waters, these mangroves are flooded with marine debris, of course. And have you done any sampling of microplastic in their guts or in their names?
Okay. Hi, Moritz. Thanks for your message or your question. Yes, so far we have not done any microplastic analysis on stranded animals. Often we work in a situation where we're informed of a carcass. I would say like 7 out of 10 times it's far from us, it's out of town, and we often have to rely on some good Samaritan who might be willing to help us grab some samples. But anyhow, even with the samples that we have processed ourselves on site, we have not looked at microplastics. I would be happy to, if you have protocol that you can email to us that we can follow. How does one sample the specimen to look for microplastics? We certainly be happy to look into it or communicate with you to see how, what's the situation. But no, we haven't done anything so far in that respect.
All right, Moritz, write a proposal now and add MareCet's name in your partners as partner for your research now. I think this is very important. I mean, like, Louisa can be and Vivian, of course, can be like the center now. Like, many of us can like join in, and of course, we don't want to see more dead dolphins, but then of course, if we come across one or two or perhaps more in the future, and this could be like our important sample to look on the gut. And look at the next question, Alison. I mean, of course, I had her in my mind when I mentioned eDNA just now, and of course, I reckon this is the one very contributing, a very important contribution from your group, Louisa, that can also add on to our catalog on our knowledge on the eDNA. So I assume no study on DNA work just yet.
Vivian, do you want to answer this?
Yeah.
Or
eDNA. For MareCet, I think we do have plans for eDNA work in the future, but for now we do not have yet. But I think there are some other marine mammal groups that are looking into eDNA work, right, Dr. Louisa?
I think also there's a group from UM that were looking at eDNA work in
Mhm.
Matang.
Correct.
I think under Song, right? Dr. Song's group. Yeah. Ourselves, we're hoping to get started in the near future with some molecular work, but it's always down to money and personnel. So we have plans, but not yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good to know. Good to know. So yeah, I mean some additional suggestion from Alison. Okay, next year FRGS, let's apply that for fundamental research grant scheme. Oh yeah, of course. I mean there are other opportunities as well. So let's have a focus group soon, hopefully, to look at this and then opportunities as well. Of course, I know. I mean a lot of things on your plates now, Louisa and Vivian. I understand that, and of course the rest of us also. But here's our chance to know them better and to contribute also to the a body of knowledge of these marine mammals, and to our mangrove and coastal environment as well. And yeah, so eDNA, marine debris, microplastic, because I know Moritz have this very has a very this strong lab and team working on microplastic. So we're looking on soil samples, I mean animals, plants as well, and then of course the habitats and ecosystem. And so there you go. I think he's actually offering his team's expertise to assist you. So okay, let's start. Let's get the discussion starting soon. Yeah. And okay, next question from Harinder again. In your population studies, how do you differentiate between the individuals to prevent multiple recordings? Of course, for humans, you can see mustache, yeah, you can see beards, but yeah, for dolphins, for example, how do you distinguish in between individuals? There you go.
Allow me to share
Yes.
quickly. So so for marine mammal researchers, we usually rely on the dorsal fin of a dolphin. So we will take the photograph of both the left and right side of their dorsal fins. So we
You want to enlarge the screen a little bit, Vivian? Yeah, put it on.
So we look into the shape of the dorsal fin, the nicks and notches of it. And also for humpback dolphins, we look at the pigmentation pattern. So you see the pink patches and gray patches. So these do not change much over time. So the change is very gradual. So with regular monitoring, we can identify each individual and follow them. And this is also the method how we identify each individual and know which areas do they use. Yeah, so and these are some of the commonly encountered humpback dolphins in Matang, and they actually each have a unique ID code with some numbers, site, and also what is the year that they are first found. So, but these are just some nicknames for the common ones. So usually we already recognize their pattern, so we know, oh, this is a regular or not. Yeah. So how we. But for finless porpoises, because they do not have a dorsal fin, so we cannot identify the finless porpoise. Yeah.
Yeah. In the earlier picture, in the earlier slide, by the way, Vivian, of course, you can see dents as well on or chips on their dorsal fin and maybe body. And if you look at the second from left, second from top, oh my goodness, look at that. That was cut, I assume, from
This
propellers.
this is flop that was cataloged in Langkawi. So it has a cut on its dorsal fin and the dorsal fin flop to one side. Yeah.
Okay.
This was nicknamed flop.
Flop, eh?
Flop is one of our regulars in Langkawi.
Wow.
Yeah, so we see flop pretty often, always in different groups. I might also add, just as a rule of thumb, especially if we're not necessarily looking straight away at the dorsal fin patterns, is that we will usually not consider groups that we encounter, which we have just encountered. So, and of course you can see if they are roughly the same group size. Sometimes within the group, there are distinctive individuals that you might already recognize. But so we're moving along, and if we encounter a group again, almost, just a few minutes apart or half an hour, after the last group or within the same general area, and this is we're talking about the same species. And as a rule of thumb, we do not count those groups because most likely it would be a repeat. Yeah. So we usually have we give like a certain distance and time that has lagged before we can consider some group as a new group within the same species.
Yeah, because there are some methods and protocols to be followed. That's good. Awesome to know. And yes, okay, I hope we hope that answered your question, Harinder. And of course, Moritz mentioned that, okay, he will share some protocols with you. And Cindy, yeah, I think Cindy's name has been mentioned like a couple of times already. Cindy, are you there? Do you want to like share a little bit your experience in Sarawak Coast, maybe, if you want?
Hi, I am indeed here. Yes, we do have dolphins along the mangrove area as well, but I couldn't find pictures in time to be shared in the talk. But yeah, we do see them. They are extensive mangrove system, especially also along the Rajang River, the biggest river in Malaysia. So we also see the tree species there as well. But I won't steal MareCet's lightning. I will, if anyone has any questions or you need any information, you can just email me. Thanks.
Another opportunity, yes. Please drop your email down in the chat, Cindy, so we can further communicate with all of you. And of course, I think Vivian has already shared the tags or links to MareCet's social media and of course their contact. So please do and email and keep the communication going. Yeah. So I mean, like, let's open some other question to the crowd. Oh, wait. I see a hand. Hold on. How do I? Yes, Sherry, Miss Sherry Rita from Mima. Yes, you've raised your hand for quite a while now, Sherry. Sorry for that. Please.
Thank you, Audrey. I hope you can hear me.
Perfect. Yeah.
Thank you so much for organizing this very wonderful session. I always enjoy presentation from MareCet on this important area, and I believe so because hardly anyone else is covering this important subject in Malaysia, right? I just wanted to add a little bit on the sense of I personally see a lot more focus coming in on noise pollution with regards to marine mammals, at least the last, I would say this year, mainly because the shipping community is now looking into this aspect because it has been highlighted at the global level. So sometimes it tickles down in that sense. So I think probably that would be one very important area where MareCet could probably be of great help because there are a lot of people interested to do this, but I don't think the expertise are really there. And sometimes the shipping community, the fraternity doesn't really know, the environment groups out there. So probably if there is a more, direct link that I could probably later on link it back to MareCet, I would definitely do that. And hopefully MareCet would take up that challenge to try to assist with this. And this is more on the shipping side, through transport ministry and so on. But I wanted to add on also in the sense of IMA, especially something that I find to be very, very interesting. I do remember, Louisa, you would call that, while you were working on the MersIng side, we were trying to work on the Straits of Malacca side with, enhanced protection. At that point, we were talking about mangroves, but of course, it would extend the protection to marine mammals and so on. But as you and I know, it is always difficult to try to get, new gazettemen and so on. So my question is very much towards, when we look into integrated protection, this is definitely one area where we see, mangrove experts like Audrey, you cover mangroves. And then we've got the marine mammals, which is probably under a different authority in the sense of enforcement and protection and so on. How is MareCet, working towards trying to propose management to these different entities and these different ministries? Where does IMA stand in that sense? I just wanted to know a bit more. Thank you.
Okay. Hi, Cheryl. Nice to see you. Thanks for your comments and questions. So with regards to the shipping community and, concerns about underwater noise, pollution and stuff like that, and marine mammals, we can definitely assist where possible, where relevant, very timely actually. So we've just had my student just graduated, another one of my students just graduated with a PhD, and we've just hired her on as our bioacoustics officer at MareCet. So she looks at underwater noise and underwater sounds of marine mammals. And it is our hope that we can work towards gathering enough information to eventually lobby actually for underwater noise to be legally recognized in Malaysia as a threat, as a conservation threat, not just to marine mammals, but a plethora of marine species that are impacted by these sounds. So definitely hit us up if there's an opportunity to look into more detail where marine noise and shipping and things like that is concerned. In terms of the IMA, so IMA actually is not a protected area. So just like the UNESCO Geopark, it is a recognition and a status afforded to an area. So for Geopark, it's an area of geological significance. With IMA, it's an area that is of significance to the life history of marine mammals, regardless of what species. But we can leverage on that because it is a designation that has come from IUCN. It's an international designation. The process has gone through a rigorous peer review, etc. So we can leverage on that to lobby for on-the-ground action. Of course, it's easier said than done, as we all know. It takes a while to get the paperwork and to get the buy-in and etc. From all stakeholders, from the community up to the government. But we can leverage on IMAs really to push for why an area should be considered either as a totally protected area or a locally managed area or an area that is zoned to have different functions within the protected area and etc. So that's what we hope that IMAs in Malaysia can do. And we hope that we can add on to the number of IMAs that we can have in Malaysia in the near future. But that requires, of course, more research, expanding to other areas and things like that. Now, in terms of different jurisdiction of different government agencies, in managing an area. So this is something that we actually looked into in detail when we were drafting the Dugong Sanctuary Management Plan for the Johor State government some years ago. And it is exactly what one of the things that we addressed in the management plan, saying that there's, this agency manages this, that agency manages that, etc. So part of the administrative structure of the management plan that we did propose was to have what we call the SMA, the Single Management Authority. And that would be determined between all parties involved who that SMA would be, right? And so the Dugong Sanctuary, if gazetted, was proposed that it should be governed by the Single Management Authority, who will be guided by a steering committee, a technical committee, and all that, just so that there's less confusion and more coordination in terms of managing the protected area. And because also what we found with the local communities is that they get very confused. And for them, whether I report to this agency or that agency, it's all government. They don't know that okay, this agency only juggles this and this agency only juggles that. So for them, it's like, I just report to your government agency and I reported to you. And then of course, then sometimes they would complain or, action wasn't taken or whatever. So one of the things is at least the ideas that we thought was something like a single management authority. But of course, that would require bringing people to the table and discussing and agreeing that, they can turun kuasa or whatever, however it works, to this single entity that would then be in touch with all relevant entities where concerned lah. Yeah. So all this is very like theoretical and things that we propose, but yeah.
Yeah, it's very complex. I agree, Louisa and Cheryl. Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. Of course, more efforts through using the policy and legal tools, MEAs that we've signed. I mean, there are Ramsar, there are other UNESCO programs like Man and Biosphere, of course, Global Geoparks Network, and World Heritage Site, for example. And then of course IMA, and then we've been working also Louisa and Vivian and me, and of course with MSMS led by Effendi. We are working also on recognizing these areas as EPSAs. Yeah, so I mean these are all very important efforts, and yes, finding or putting them together and then finding the most comprehensive way to tackle and to manage, especially, is very important. And buy-ins from government agencies, state authority in particular, and of course supported by federal authorities. I mean, of course, this is very important. So, of course, we cannot do that alone. Yeah, again, I mean, this is again another reason or another important point why MyMangrove was formed from the start, that we try to get everyone together. Of course, first looking at mangroves as a habitat, and now we know it's not just the forest, it's not just the plants, but it is also, that includes also the waters, yeah, the marine fauna, yeah, the marine mammals, but for this topic today. So they move. This is why I studied plant in the beginning. Louisa, I don't know if you've heard this. I'm pretty sure you've heard this many times already. I studied mangrove forest and mangrove plant because they're there, right? They don't move. But it's harder to study marine mammals, animals in general, and even worse is to study humans. Oh my goodness, so complicated. So that's why I just stick to my mangrove forest. Anyway, all right. So policy, legal tools. Okay, let's figure that out. I think it's a very good input from Cheryl just now. Like whatever we do, of course, I mean the scientific part of it, the ecological part of it. These will contribute to, of course, knowledge. But the more important thing that we require help is to bridge that, into policy, into legislation, into getting people. I know one of the points that Vivian raised at number 6, I think, awareness, right? I mean the issue with humans. So the last point was awareness. I mean, we can actually carry that to the first, but then, I mean, to increase that, we first need knowledge and, of course, bridging, right, towards that as well. And, of course, we've mentioned about education. All this, I mean, all past 10 talks actually raise the same issue. Like, we now know, the scientific committee know this and that, but then to make it, to generalize it, or to provide the information for general public, that will be another challenge. And finally, to bridge it into legal, into policy. Oh, that's another challenge. So I'm happy actually to see some representative from government agencies with us today. Of course, Cheryl with Mima, but we also have a representative from Forestry Department, and then I think Fisheries Department as well. I think possibly, some of them. I see Cik Jamal. Jamal is from Forestry Department. Cik Jamal, do you want to provide some suggestions or comment now that we are focusing on Matang Mangrove, and now you know that Matang Mangrove is very important for dolphins and marine mammals? Any suggestion to your top management, perhaps, or to bring up to the ministry? Please, Jamal, yes.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Tri. Actually, it's a new topic for us, actually, because since you are having more on the forest, but today we also learn that some exclusive species of dolphins also a part of Matang also. They're also using Matang as their refuge. But yeah, lah, on the power side, on the jurisdiction, we have only jurisdiction on the mangrove side, on the fishes and dolphins, mostly on fisheries department. So yeah, lah, in some sense, we also collaborating with fisheries department in our meeting. But yeah, lah, it's good lah if we can have one-stop center for this IMA. But yeah, lah, there's something to be thought of lah, of the more higher authorities such as ministries lah.
Yeah,
I
ministry
think that's
level. Ministry
I
level would
think
be a good idea for
it's
Namal.
good. It's more appropriate lah.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think ministry level would be another one way to go, and perhaps state or district level, or maybe state level would be another option. But then not just fisheries, by the way. I mean, if we are looking at fisheries resources, and perhaps they are in the know of these marine mammals within our waters. But then, of course, like drainage and channels, like rivers. Department of Irrigation and Drainage would be part of that as well. So, and from my past discussion, perhaps this is another gray area in between departments and agencies, of which, like, what's happening in the water. Of course, Forestry Department looking at the forest stands, yeah, and perhaps we neglect the water, the hydrology side of this habitat and ecosystem. So another challenge there. So it is complicated. Mangrove is complicated, although I said, it's easier for me to study, but being in the middle of this land and sea, physically being there in the middle, so they are very complex to be managed as well. Eh? Okay, so we take note of that. Thank you, Project Zamal, and then of course representative from other agencies as well. Louisa, you raise your hand. Is that for you? I think we can. Maybe you can have this a summary now. I think if there's no further question from the rest, final comment from you and Vivian, and or perhaps Hope. and
I just wanted to we're talking about forestry department or agencies and things like that. So actually some years ago in the previous version of the Mata Mangrove Forest working plan, the late Mr. Gunn, I think most of you would know him in the forestry and mangrove realm. The late Mr. Gunn actually had us do a short write-up for the working plan about the cetaceans of Matang, just to kind of throw it in there that there are these other species that are associated with mangroves and utilize mangroves as nursery grounds, feeding grounds, etc. And that's why it's important to always manage the mangroves in Matang properly. So I just wanted to note that even though the working plan is, of course, very much focused on the forest itself and how the trees are felled and the production of the charcoal, etc. We had put in a little bit of a write-up on cetaceans for the previous version. Yeah, and I think Mr. Gunn was working on the next version, and then of course he passed on. So that's that. Yeah, but I think thank you again so much, Dr. Audrey, for having us both speak today at the Mangrove Discourse. I think especially, Matang is a close place in our hearts, but especially for Vivian, that's where a lot of the work she's done has been done. But I think doing this work in relation to mangroves as well is just an important provider to us of how important mangroves are, not just from the perspective of carbon sequestration and, shoreline protection, but it supports biodiversity within the forest. it provides habitat for many of our seafood resources, then which in turn attracts other marine wildlife to the area. And I'm not trying to promote, for example, dolphin watching to an extent where it's unmanageable, but the dolphins have to some extent brought the locals in Matang income, because they do take people out to go see the dolphins and other marine life, the bird life, the otters. If you're lucky at low tide, sometimes the babi hutan comes out looking for stuff on the mud flats, the macaques come out, the storks are there, they're always very impressive. Lesser adjutant, the burung botak, I think they call it. Yeah. So, and as I showed in the earlier part of the presentation, there are many populations of marine mammals within Malaysia as well as around the world that are reliant on mangroves, either directly, like that manatee munching on the mangrove leaves, or indirectly just by virtue of providing a good habitat that is productive for these animals to survive. I was recently we were recently doing some work in an area that was highly disturbed. I mean, the shoreline didn't have any more natural habitat at all. And we weren't seeing animals at all along this highly disturbed shoreline, but just adjacent to that area, where there was still mangroves and nipa forests right on the shoreline, we were seeing some dolphins. So it was very clear to me how these habitats support the presence of food, which goes back to what I mentioned that my mentor told me before. No food, no marine mammals. And that was a really clear snapshot for us that in an area where there's still natural habitat, natural shoreline, that provides an avenue for food, so things can survive. And in an area where it's completely, there's no more natural habitat, then it's very unlikely that animals would be able to persist, because, I mean, you wouldn't want to hang around an area that has no warung or no restaurants, right? Yeah. So I know you love mangroves, so I hope this makes you happy that, mangroves are important, and they're important even for the animals that we love personally.
Correct. Yep. No mangrove, no fish, no mangrove, no seafood, no mangrove, no dolphins. There you go. A lot of taglines, a lot of a motto. Yeah. I mean, to show. I mean, we are here to already highlighting all of the importance. So let's stop. Seeing more destruction. Hopefully. Yeah? And Vivian, please, some final words from you, please.
Similar to Dr. Louisa, I just want to thank Dr. Audrey as well for inviting us for this presentation. And as many of you know, Matang is one of the best managed mangrove forests in the world. So for those who have not visited Matang or have not seen the dolphins in Matang, do go there to explore and experience it for yourself. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much for the final message. Yes. And thank you again, Louisa, for highlighting that the late Gan Boon Kiong actually worked very hard, tirelessly. In fact, he passed on a week before he presented the final version of the most recent working plan. But I think, Cik Jamal, can I please double check the latest working plan for 2021-2030 is not out yet, right? I mean, is it still being finalized or?
What I found out from Perak, they're being printed.
Oh, it's been printed now. Very soon we will have the chance to, take a look at Mr. Gun's, the late Mr. Gun's final work, I think, yeah, for Matang Mangrove. Yes, it is a 10-year working plan. There are 10-year working plans starting from 1930s. So the recent one, yeah. Yes, I remember that section. I have the fourth version revision here, just before the 10 period, 10 years period, 2009 to 2019 to 2009 to 2020. Yeah, I left it at home. So
the
I remember that section.
Roslan.
Yeah,
The
that's
last time, macam mana terus
yes, correct. Yeah, I mean, I remember. Yeah, I mean, the progress in working plans. I mean, these documents are evolving. Of course, it was hardcore civil culture a long time ago, and now they're putting in some more inputs on the ecology, on the human dimension as well, the socio-economic dimension, and slowly, hopefully, yeah, the latest one would be a very good textbook, yeah, for school children and for communities, for public to read as well. And of course, please, Louisa and Vivian, keep up the good work. I think that's the same messages you receive. I mean, in the chat, and I'm pretty sure many people will start contacting you from now. First to write proposals together, I assume, and of course asking a lot of questions as well. And I hope and I pray that, I mean, viewers today, particularly funders, please support these fundamental research, this important exploration of knowledge, because we need to know, right? As Louisa mentioned earlier, to document, documenting these knowledge is the vital part of establishing these areas for protection, for conservation, be it under UNESCO programs, be it under United Nations program, IUCN programs, all of these, in fact, in national level as well, to promote them as a forest reserve, for example, or a state park, or maybe a UNESCO and a national geopark, for example. All of these would require fundamental knowledge, and this is your chance already. Now you know Louisa, now you know Vivian, and of course all the lovely ladies in particular working with MareCet. These are hardcore scientists, these are hardcore researchers and conservationists, and let's support them. Yeah. And of course, again, I would like to thank you, Louisa. I mean, I know, look at her eyes. So now you can like have the whole evening and night, perhaps the whole day tomorrow to get to recover from your jet lag. And Vivian, of course, keep up the excellent work, and of course, with your team at MareCet. And of course, I would like to thank everyone here. Of course, we cannot hear from everyone. I mean, like for question and answer today, but of course we will respond. We will continue to respond to your messages or maybe emails later on. Yeah, and as our traditional or our usual closing activity would be group photo. So please, for those of you remaining on Zoom, can you turn on your video? This is a proof of attendance as well, and perhaps memento for Louisa and Vivian. Thank you, Cindy. Aranda, which mangrove is that behind you?
This one is on the backwaters.
In where?
Backwaters. The backwaters of Sungai, what do you call that? Sepang Kecil.
I see. Okay, right. Cik Azrael, thank you for joining. I received text from Abang Jamal just now, so I will respond to it later. Okay, so is that it? I mean, anyone else? I gave you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 second chance. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Eat a sun, una renda muna. All right. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. So there you go. That's the end of the October 2022 edition of the Malaysian Mangrove Research Alliance and Network, MyMangrove Monthly Discourse. We now know from January until October now, for just this 1 year, we know mangroves are extremely important for a fauna organism like marine mammals, cetaceans, and of course earlier we learned about the importance for home for sharks as well, yeah, fish, and other processes being regulated by these habitats and ecosystems. So there will be another talk next month by Dr. Hazrin Chong from UKM. So we will hear about hang on. Oops, sorry. So we will learn about microorganism or microbacterial activity in November. So that will be the final speaker for our series this year. And many of you know that, okay, everyone is back now in the field, back in the office. So perhaps this will be the final online session at the moment. We haven't got any plans just yet for next year or the year after. But of course, please stay tuned for the final speech or final seminar by Dr. Hazlin next month. And please stay alert and please stay tuned for information on our MyMangrove Facebook page and Facebook group as always. Yeah. So again, final thank you to Dr. Louisa and Dr. Vivian and MareCet for today's session. And of course, we'll be in touch. I will text you later. I will email you later for some details and more information. And of course, to write together also and to work on some other things as well. And mind you that MareCet is super load with a lot of projects already. And some signature project is like wheels on the wheel. So try to chase them, yeah, if you can. Yeah. All right. So ladies and gentlemen, again, thank you very much and take care.
Thank you so much.
And happy
Thank you.
mangroving.